So we'll start with public comment. Is that one's on?
Sorry.
Pass it around. Pennridge School Board welcomes public comment according to policy. Now they remind everyone of the following. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. Participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and note their name and municipality. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer rather than to individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. A speaker may speak once during each comment period. Please note that these sessions are designated for comments to protect the confidentiality and privacy rights of all members of our community. Board encourages members of the public to direct any comments regarding particular individuals such as students, district employees, privately to the superintendent or other appropriate administrators or board members, or to communicate with the board and superintendent privately by sending an email to the TSD schoolboard@pennridge.org. Questions raised and not addressed may be followed up at a later time. One comment, Mr. John Wilson from Bedminster.
No.
I was looking forward to that.
Sorry. I didn't sign in.
Oh, no. It's not a trick question.
Sorry.
I think you're obligated to comment when you sign in.
Your coconut patty. I'm so hungry. Okay, so we have a review of policies for first reading. The first one is 124.2, which is a revised dual enrollment policy. Dr. Weinerfeld, if you'd like to give a little overview?
Yeah, okay. So we have a couple of revisions on this policy. On page 1 of 4, if you're looking at the policy, just a minor revision, we've extended this to from grades 10 to 12, because occasionally there are 10th grade students that are approved. And then if you look on pages 2 and 3, that's where the majority of clarification and deletion of language occurs. So I won't read through it, but open it up if there are any questions or comments about the proposed changes on pages 2 and 3.
Can I highlight just 2 things on page 2, just to give you a sense for what because some of these are connected conversations we had earlier in the year. That top paragraph, currently independent studies are not grade carrying courses. And so we had to change the language for dual enrollment courses, because if you remember at the beginning of the year, we talked about college level courses counting as a grade, and then obviously impacting then the grade point average and class rank and all the pieces that come with that. And so we were changing the language to elective as opposed to independent study, and then that last sentence there is added just to show that they will be included in calculations. What used to be number 3, which I have no idea what number it is now. I think it's number 1, but I don't know. The student have achieved. Currently what was there was that students needed a 2.5 GPA or better, and that there was no allowance for students below a 2.5. If you had a 2.5, if you were below a 2.5, you couldn't do it. And so what we've done is we've lowered that to 2.3, which is the equivalent of a C+ in terms of from a GPA standpoint. If you have below a 2.3 and you get permission from your guidance counselor and the high school administration, because they did say that there are students on occasions that might be C students that have a 2.1, or a 2.0, but it would be appropriate for them to take course X. But we do want a permission in there just to make sure that the guidance counselor and the high school administration both say, yes, we do agree that in this circumstance we are going to. So we made that exception built in there. That's the purpose of number 1. You can see that all the other language we removed is just PSSA and Keystone language, which is no longer pertinent for the high school, but it was part of the policy. And so we've removed it.
The only other thing I noted here is that we've removed the attendance requirement. Have met high school attendance requirements during their prior enrollment.
Where is that?
I don't know if that's
Yes.
what
I
used
see
to
it.
be number
Right.
3.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, if you take a student and you dual enroll them, but they have attendance issues for one reason or another, is that harmful to them in that dual enrollment?
And it may very well be the thought behind taking that out was just that if the students have the grades that we felt as though they qualified. And if they didn't have the grades, then the adults that are associated with them would help make that decision as to whether that opportunity was appropriate for them. One of the purposes of this is just to expand opportunities for kids, right? And so this is one avenue for some students where college level courses may be appropriate, either through enrichment or remediation or just interest, something they're interested in that we don't offer. And so tech school is one of those options. I think dual enrollment courses is one of those options, and to expand that is where possible. So that's
Thank you.
So I had heard from some parents who are working on the dual enrollment, who felt like they were very limited as when they're trying to figure out the courses that their child can take and the direction that, if they're looking to go after high school, that they're very limited as far as which courses they can take. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we can, expand those opportunities and maybe look into what some of the concerns are. Because I know, I just heard from one parent in the last week or so who was saying that every time they'd say, well, this would be a good course. Oh, well, no, you can't take that one. Well, this one would be a good course. And they kind of kept going back through, and it was like pulling teeth trying to find something that they were actually able to take and able to get credit for that fit into the model that they were looking at. And I don't know if that has anything to do with, we're saying that they can't duplicate any courses, that we have here. And I know there was discussion about whether or not we should leave that up to the guidance counselors to decide whether or not that fits best, because sometimes that may be the better option depending on how it fits in the student's schedule. So, I just think, I think the policy should err on the side of more opportunities to more kids rather than, restricting opportunities and giving more of the say to the guidance counselor, the parents, and the student for each individual situation, and and limit as little as possible in the policy itself. So that and obviously then the guidance counselor would be making that decision based on what's best for the student. Like if a kid is at the tech school and we have a course here and that course is only offered at the time that they're there, it would make sense for that student to be able to take that course at the college instead of being restricted by the fact that we already offer that course. So, there's definitely situations, we talk about our sciences sometimes and how difficult it is to schedule sciences and labs, and that sometimes that those kids aren't able to take some of these other courses because the times just don't line up. And so if we're restricting those opportunities for kids, it makes sense for them to have that leeway to be able to take it somewhere else if they can. So, that's what's standing out to me is where you limit it. I guess there's other places probably in here too that limit it, but I would want to give as much leeway as possible to the guidance counselors who are meeting the individual needs of each student, because it's not every student is different and every student's path is different, and so I don't think we can cookie cutter it,
Yeah, I think that's a good point about being at the tech school at a time when something is offered here, because I think you are moving into a period where we're telling students you don't have to choose tech school or the high academic classes. But if we say that but we don't make it possible for them, then you're not going to have students getting the full advantage of, because there are some people who could benefit from getting a technical degree program over there who also still want to go to college but would need the higher level classes. So I think it would be good to open that up.
So there are two pieces that come into play there. One is the types of courses that students can take, and the language is specific because of the contractual responsibilities with the teacher contract. So the word supplant there is purposeful to make sure that if it is a course that Pennridge offers, students cannot choose to take it someplace else for that Pennridge credit. and that is to both honor the Pennridge courses, but also to honor the Pennridge teachers who are teaching those courses. And so the counselors did not talk about exceptions in terms of tech school students and there being particular courses. That's something we would have to speak to them about, because those are more one-off, very specific things, as opposed to saying to a student, you can take biology wherever you want. And so the purpose of this is not to say you can take biology wherever you want. Biology is a course that all students take. It is a course that we offer, and so it will be taken here. Now, students who aren't successful here or want a different level of biology after they take the first one, this policy then does allow that. A couple things that we're doing in terms of to increase opportunities. One of them is the timing of the courses at the community college. Up until currently, there were limited options in terms of when the community college offered the courses. And so our students could only fit them into certain blocks of their day. And obviously they're semester courses, so it would have to be first half, second half, or you'd have to take semester courses. So students were only going over there in the morning for those courses. The community college is expanding those time offerings so that if a student has the possibility to be able to take a course, which is our equivalent of periods 5, 6, and 7, that now will be a possibility. So there will be more flexibility of, well, I can't go over first thing in the day because that's when French 4 is. Or whatever their scheduling limitations are at the high school, they might be able to go over there for periods 3 and 4, and so they might have to leave and come back. It may not be as convenient, but they still may be able to do that. And so that will be beginning in the fall, so we'll have to see what that does in terms of increasing the number. The community college has been wonderful in terms of marketing as well as changing some of those limitations. There was a great meeting with the guidance counselors here and the counselor and the head of the community college Percy campus to talk through some of those scheduling issues and to say, why do you do it this way on your end? Well, this is what we need, and this is what we need to work that out for kids. But from a course standpoint, in terms of just basically saying, yes, if it works for you, you can take that, or leaving it up to the guidance counselor, our current contract will not allow us to do that in terms of it. Now, we did talk about remediation and things like that.
Scheduling conflicts and things like
Well,
that?
that's the piece we'll have to talk through with counselors, because as we met, they didn't speak about that in terms of, oh, I had this one student who really, had they been able to take biology, it would have freed up these 3 other courses they wanted to take.
Right.
And so I see that situation a little differently, and I think those are ones we would want to often go to the union and say, here's a situation that we really help this kid, as opposed to establishing a practice
Right.
that says you can take any course you want anytime. Right? I don't think that's their purpose. I don't think the purpose of that is to limit that one kid, but I also am not sure whether the counselors had those situations. And dual enrollment has not been a huge number, and so I'm not sure how many students didn't do it, and now that we have some other flexibilities, there may be more of those situations that become situations than we know of right now. So we'll say something to the guidance counselors about that.
That'd be good.
About that piece. The only other thing on page 3, and it's the very top of page 3, and we again talked about this as well, that we really are going to review the rigor of the course to say, is that an academic course, an honors course, or an AP course? Primarily, those would be academic courses, and since there's different weighting, we'll have to be there. But we'll have to look at how we offer it and what that course is equivalent here, as well as the AP option is put in there for students who might go beyond our course selection. We have students who either in math or science primarily will go beyond what we offer and might take something very specialized. And it may not be at Bucks, it might be a Johns Hopkins course on linear algebra. We may make the decision to make that an AP weighted course because it is clearly beyond and clearly a college level course, even though it's not an AP sanctioned course. And so we just worked in the flexibility there. Again, this is new for us, and so we're going to have to monitor this in terms of establishing our rules about, yep, that one's academic, yep, that one's honors, yep, that one's AP, to see what the students sign up for.
But us being able to give them actual credit for taking the courses is huge. I
Yeah.
mean, that was a big.
That was what kept
that-
people from doing it.
People, yeah.
Kept
I mean,
my children from doing it. So,
We'll see. There was a lot of interest in the meetings, both here and at the community college. Now, we'll see how many of that actually turns into in terms of students, but there were at least a lot of parents and a lot of students who attended both meetings.
nice.
Okay.
Good.
Anything else? No. So now go on to the next one. First reading for policy number 214, class rank.
So this is a pretty easy addition. We added GPA to this
Yeah.
one.
Okay,
Any
let me
questions
see.
about that one?
No?
Okay.
And then
Would I
lastly,
be the
first
only
reading
one?
of policy number 707, use of school facilities.
Okay, so we had a lot of discussion about this policy the last time, and we brought it back for first reading because we took a lot of the comments and recommendations, looked at the policy as it relates to the request forms that people fill out for the use of facilities. So we made the effort to make those documents match. So starting on page 3, you will see some minor updates. On page 3, about halfway down, that really just talks about organizations that use facilities, would provide for police or school security personnel. We added in there protection. And then the major changes are on pages 5 and 6. And this is where we clarified some language to make things match the policy and the forms and match the practice that we believe should be in place. So there are 3 categories of groups when you start down at fee guidelines. And we've, again, clarified those groups. So the first group are Pennridge community youth organizations, non-Pennridge community youth organizations with at least 2/3 Pennridge students that are participating in that group. And then activities that include parent and booster groups and non-public schools within the district. So that is the first category, and then that category of groups has a rate of 10%, which is listed on the corresponding rate sheet that we have.
I believe it's 10% only if they charge
If they
admission or
charge,
registration.
yes.
But those are the groups that are free.
Oh.
It becomes 10% if they're
If they charge.
charging a fee.
Okay.
Then there is some money they'll have to recoup. That's
Okay.
rare, but that does happen with some of those groups.
Okay.
I do want to pause at each 3 of these because we're trying to really clarify if someone from the outside, they need to be able to know what group they fall into easily, because currently the language didn't match. So the language from the actual facility use forms, and there are 2 of them, one for the turf field and one for the everything else, as well as this policy. So as you read through number 1, I just want to make sure it is clear to you in terms of the groups we're talking about. Right, and then when we get to groups 2 and 3, to make sure that every group you can imagine, it clearly falls into a bucket. Because I think right now they call Jackie and go, huh? Am I 2? Am I, right? Or they don't fill out the form sometimes.
Or they're one category
Right.
on one page. and
Exactly
they're a
right.
different
Well, the
category
language
on
will be
the other.
identical.
That will be-
Yeah.
So, okay, you want to pause there? I do
Yes.
have a question at this point. How do we monitor the 2/3 Pennridge students? How does, and who's responsible for doing that?
Mhm.
Right, and we talked about that really needs to be an honor system. We know a lot of the groups that our students participate on, so I don't think we decided to include anywhere that they would list the number of students, list the number of Pennridge students, because really then, what are we gonna do? Stand at the field and count kids and, enforce it that way?
Right.
But it's really, somewhat of an honor system that,
But we could end up with a group that has very few Pennridge students in it.
We certainly
I mean,
could have groups that lie.
ultimately,
We
yeah.
certainly could have
Yeah.
groups that lie.
Well, but I think if they
We are-
get caught, then,
Who's going to catch them?
No,
So who's
I-
monitoring?
Well,
There's no
enforcement here.
we'll have a counter and listen. Well, I
We
think,
were trying to respond to the conversation that there are some youth organizations that are not within our boundaries that service our kids, right? And service our kids primarily. Now, not solely, but primarily. And so we picked a number, and we picked a number that was above 50% simply because then it made it sound like you're mainly Pennridge, right? You're basically a Pennridge group, but your first word says Souderton, or I don't even know who the groups are, right? So I'm probably the good one to talk about this, because I don't even know who we're really talking about, but I know it was a conversation we had about this policy. And the form will literally say, does your group have at least 2/3 Pennridge students, yes or no? And so if somebody's coming from Delaware, we'll probably catch them. Right, if they all pull in, they have out-of-state plates.
we're sharp.
But if they pull in and they're wearing Souderton Go Teams, right, and there we go. Unless somebody tells on them and then we dig into it, I guess we could go there. But really what we're looking at, because when you get to the youth organizations, which is then going to be group 2, right? So when you get to that standpoint, they pay 20%. And so we're really talking about 0 to 20%. Now, it's not no money, but it is not a significant amount of money if they were coming here to use our field for an hour and they lied about the 2/3. So some of it was, we felt like we did want to accommodate these groups, but we don't have the manpower, nor do we think it's appropriate to have the manpower to actually ask them for rosters. You know, to send us a list of your 50 girls and we want to see their mailing addresses, right? We could do that. It seemed as though we didn't want to put the manpower into that from a cost standpoint because those groups would be free. So we would be incurring costs without them paying anything. So it's obviously why we're bringing it to you. And so if you feel like that's inappropriate now as we talk through it, because it is going to be some, right, honor system, at least for that one piece of it. Everything else seems to be cut and dry. So.
An example could be field hockey. We don't have a local field hockey team. You have to go, if you have kids in field hockey, they have to go play field hockey elsewhere. And so if those teams have more than 2/3, and maybe it'll encourage, because a lot of those places, a lot of those groups don't really have a lot of field choices either. And so if that makes them start to move here, maybe that gives more Pennridge kids more opportunities to play for that sport too. Because now if we're housing it, if they're hosting it here, maybe that's encouraging more of our kids to get involved in that sport without traveling, so.
Can I ask a question though? So does it go by team or by organization? Because like you could say, I know Deep Run has Pennridge kids, so it's not a good example, but does this apply to Deep Run, Valley Sports Association, or does it go team by team within the organization? Do you understand what I'm asking?
That's a good
I
question.
do. I guess I'm trying to figure out whether there would be a scenario that is what you're talking about, which means they have multiple teams and some of them are Pennridge and some of them are non-Pennridge, but they all have the same name.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that organization exists or not. I, again, do not know the community well enough to know whether we've got Souderton teams, that a lot of them are all Souderton kids, but in field hockey, it's mainly Pennridge kids, right? Which is really what
Yeah.
you're talking
I
about.
mean, I
You've
don't-
got a good point,
So-
Jen. I think Deep Run's probably a reasonable example.
Well, I mean, Deep Run is obviously all, well, not
Right.
all
No,
Pennridge,
it's not all
but, you know,
Pennridge.
it's not
No,
all, but it is.
Probably
more-
most of their
yeah,
teams
most.
fit this
Probably
definition
7/8.
anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
7/8. Yeah,
I'm just throwing out a fraction.
so,
Well, I
So-
guess what we could do is we could decide on language, and then we could really monitor the situation over the next 6 to 12 months to say, okay, what did we run into? Right? Did we run into 8
Yeah, you're not
examples
gonna
where
know
somebody had to
until
say
you try.
really?
mhm.
Or
Yeah.
did we run into no examples or one example and
Yeah.
go, okay, there was only one example where we really had to pay
We'll be
attention.
watching for you, Delaware.
Yeah, right. So sneaky New Jersey schools.
I guess the other thing that I wanted to kind of touch base on, and, you know, I haven't paid that much attention to the structure up there, but I hear from the community that people want to be able to come here on a Saturday morning and walk around on the track. And so, you know, they paid for it, so if no one's using it, why can't community members come here and walk around on the track? Because the reality is, if someone's going to be breaking in to do damage, they're not asking for permission. So the only people we're keeping out are the people who actually want to come in and just walk around on the track. So, you know, I would like to see us, you know, obviously it needs to be secured at night, people, usually they have like dusk, everything's secured or whatever, but during the day, I don't see an issue with letting the public come in and walk on the track or run on the track or
We
whatever.
did talk about this a little bit at the last meeting.
We did, and where it
More
landed was we did
yeah.
it based off of personnel. And so in the summer, there are hours that are available. They're not weekend hours, they're Monday through Thursday hours because that corresponds with when we have staff and our kids are not using it. It's primarily June and July, some early August. But once middle of August hits, you know, our students are up there 24/7 almost. And so that was kind of the discussion we had. So we're open to other discussion. We don't always have staff here on a Saturday, although there are many Saturdays we have staff, especially at the high school, right, which is really the facility we're talking about. It would be an added responsibility for them. There would not be monitoring other than the cameras, which would be reactive, not proactive to what we're talking about, although in most instances we're talking about law-abiding people who are not coming up here to cause problems. Most high schools in the county do not leave their tracks open. The ADs have gathered that information. It's not zero, but it is not many. I believe it was 3 school districts that did, and that's if you count Central Bucks, and Central Bucks leaves their one stadium open, and that's because they don't own it. It's a borough, the borough of Doylestown owns CB West Football Stadium, they only lease it, and so part of the lease is it will be remained open. And so if you don't count that one, it's 2 other school districts of the 12 that do leave their current facilities open for the public.
I
So,
suspect a lot of it has to do with liability.
well, and I think it has to do with damage and liability.
They
I think
trip
both
and
of
fall up
those
there
things.
and break
Yeah,
their
damage and
knees.
liability for sure.
They're up there by themselves, they're up there every night, yeah, no, I don't want nothing
But if
to do
someone
with it.
trips and falls on our field playing soccer,
We're already leaving it open
There's
for summer,
medical
so what's-
people there. If somebody's on our field playing soccer, there's medical people there. If somebody's up there on a Saturday walking the track alone and they have a heart attack, now what? I don't want anything to do with this.
Didn't we say that we were opening it, Mr. Kraus, for the summer though? Yes?
We-
No?
But
Yeah,
there's
that's when there's
personnel,
people here.
Oh, I see.
It's when our
I
staff
see
is
what
here.
you're
there's
saying.
personnel
Yes.
here.
So
Right.
in this case, there will be no person, I see your concern then, yeah.
I'm just, this.
but there's
Concerns
not
me.
always personnel on the fields when there's.
No, not on the
people.
field, but here at least just to lock it and, I mean, you'd have
So
to have
but-
somebody
but
come
now
in
you-
on
but
Saturday.
you would
Now you're
find
giving
them.
a false sense of, hey, we have you protected, and so if someone has a heart attack and you don't get there for 2 hours, I mean, it's really no different, because we're not suggesting that someone's sitting there watching the track. And someone can easily trip and fall and hurt themselves on a field too.
There's a reason the other school districts don't allow it, and I'm curious as to what that is.
There's so
but
many parks around here. Go to Peace Valley and Lake Mount.
They can get down and walk Yoder.
That's a really good.
And there you
Not a
have it.
track, but-
That's a valid.
I've seen, I mean, people go under the chain and just walk on it anyway.
They're trespassing.
But people aren't, I guess my point is, you know, the people who are going to go in and do damage, aren't going to be stopped by our rules, because they're not gonna ask permission to go in there and damage our field. They're gonna go in there and damage it anyway.
I just kind of come back on
Let's-
topic here. On
let's go
page
back.
7 of this, there is a little, I think 1, 2, 3, fourth one down. It says a building service employee must be on duty at all times when a district facility is in use.
Oh, that's a policy.
If such coverage requires the hiring of additional personnel or the extension of the employee's work hours, such cost shall be borne by the lessee at the cost of the overtime pay.
But there's no lessee in this
Right, right.
case.
Exactly.
So like on a
so-
Saturday morning, we don't have anybody here to unlock
Yeah.
and
So,
relock.
I think
Some Saturday morning, and probably it's even most Saturday mornings when you talk about the high school, right? The
Mhm.
high school is a pretty busy place on
Yes.
the weekend, especially if sports are in session, right? There's probably a couple 3-week
Somebody.
spans between sports seasons that it may not be as crazy, but Saturday, we would routinely have a person here, if that's the letter of the policy. We wouldn't have as many people as we do. One of the reasons in the summer is that all hands are on deck, and we have multiple people here. It's not like a Saturday where you might have 2 people that are on, doing the 2 ends of the building. We'd have, I don't know how many custodians we have here in the summer, but it's probably 20 that are here at one time, during the day.
We also have our nutrition committee, just met 2 weeks ago, and we had to go through a checklist, I guess that's issued by the state, of the things that you're required to have in your nutrition committee. And one of the things we had to answer no to that we don't have is access to our track and facilities for people in the public to use, so that we're encouraging healthy habits. So that was actually on our checklist, and I was like, I'm gonna share that at the next meeting when we're talking about facilities use.
Okay. So, back to changes.
So number 2. Ready to go? Are we good on that topic? Number 2.
Okay, the second category is written as all nonprofit adult organizations and all non-Pennridge youth organizations with fewer than 2/3 Pennridge students. And to just make sure I'm reading that clearly.
We are trying to parse it as closely as possible.
And then that fee is 20%. So is that clear enough?
Okay.
Okay. And then the third category is all for-profit youth or adult organizations. And then that would be at the regular cost of use.
And we do understand that all encompasses both youth and adult, but we felt like since we differentiated every place else, we should differentiate at number 3.
Okay.
So for the grammar helps, right?
Yeah.
And if that language works, we would make sure that that language matches the actual facility use forms that people complete, because that shows them. The only complication is then if you're group 1 and you're charging admission. That's the only oddball then of really the groups. That's when it goes from 0 to 10%.
So that.
And so this will be the same for every facility that people can rent?
The turf field has separate rates, and the turf field is not.
But the categories, I mean.
Correct. The
Okay.
categories will be the same, but it is not free to use the turf field if you are group 1.
Until it's changed again.
That's right.
Because it's changed at least twice every year for
That's right.
however.
Unless you choose to make it free, that's right.
And now, as far as the rates and all of that, is that something that we're looking at here, or is that different? I'm just curious if we're in line
Yeah.
with what other districts are charging.
And we are, although I do not have that data on hand, because I do know that we've spoken about that, so they have pulled that data for probably 6 school districts. I've asked them to actually expand it a little more into Montgomery County, since we border as many of them as we do Lower Buxes and as Pert and Just as Souderton and North Penn, places that way. So we can bring that information to you, although that information is not pertinent to the actual policy language. And so we could change the fees without worrying about the language because they are separate documents from that standpoint. So, but we will pull that because that is, I know, something that we've talked about.
Any other questions or comments about those last one or the rest of them all together again? Any more, any public comment? Crickets?
Well, I just do want to point out that if we are going to do our volunteering thing, like changing our volunteering system or whatever we do, that we might also need to look at different policies regarding our volunteers as far as different programs that you might offer. I know, again, when I went to one of the
Excuse me. Thank you.
one of the PSBA conferences, I think it was 2017, I was trying to find my notes. I went to a session where they talked about volunteers and different ways of incentivizing people to volunteer. And so there was that thing, I don't think it was Downingtown, but Downingtown has like a rebate for seniors. And I know that people have been talking about different things that you can do with taxes. But I never looked into it very far. I came home and shared it, but it was, at that time, we were told that there's, again, with the teacher contract, not that those people would necessarily be stepping on the professional staff's toes, but that there was a lot of things that you would need to consider and whether you would be able to do that. But if we're going to change our volunteering system to be pulling more people in from the community, maybe we need to look at the policies that cover that kind of thing too, and whether we want to incentivize. Yeah, it's Downingtown that has it, but I don't think Downingtown was the one that gave the presentation. I'm not sure. Like I couldn't. Yeah, this was back in. It was 16 or 17, but I'm pretty sure it was 17. And then I had come home and talked about it, but it didn't. Everyone was unsure, and I think it's still unsure now whether.
I think maybe we can have Mike look into it.
Yeah, definitely should be, like, just because Downingtown does it.
Yeah.
True.
You can't just take what another school district is doing and bring it to your school district without having, making sure that your lawyer looks at it, so. But that was just, I figured that goes with policy, not activities.
Anything else? Yes. Ms. Farwell.
People
You don't have to.
know that I'm not.
Just project.
From West Rockville Township. need to go back and see what you promised the public when you borrowed that 10 million bucks to build that field out there. Because I think one of the promises was that it would be an asset to the community, that they would be able to use it. And to renege on that promise, I don't think very highly of that if it was made. I can't quite remember. The other thing is, in the last meeting where we were looking at the swimming schedule, it appears to me that the Pennridge Aquatic Club is monopolizing the pool every night. And again, the community pays for this pool, and the people that staff it, and all the chemicals and the lights and everything, and for a huge amount of the year, they're denied use of it, any practical use of it. And during the summer, you can find pools, okay? You know, we've got several of them around here. But during the winter is when you'd like to have access to the indoor pool that you're paying for as a taxpayer. So I think the Pennridge Aquatic Club should either cut their practice short one night or limit themselves to one end of the pool or not come at all. Because I honestly believe that the Pennridge public deserves at least one night per week. And they're not getting it. And they're paying for everything. And like I say, in the middle of the winter, in the fall, winter and spring, you can't go to your local outside pool. And I believe that the public deserves some consideration in those two areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Maybe that is why we have such low turnout, because we are only opening it in the summer and people have other places to go. I wonder if it would be different at different
Oh,
times
to
of
be
the
fair
year.
though, Pennridge Aquatic is paying for their,
Well, right,
Use
right,
as
okay,
well,
and
yeah.
the public has to pay too. But we just said, he just said that we were adding an hour to every single day that they didn't have before. So I'm sure one of those hours, because that's adding 5 hours a week, that they never used any other year. So I'm sure one of those hours could be used for the public one of those nights of the week, maybe something to look at. But I hadn't thought about it that, because when he said that there's low turnout, it made me think, well, then why should we add more time? But I hadn't thought about the seasonal aspect of it.
or consistency.
And the
Well,
community,
yeah,
the
it's
If it's
not
community,
always the
consistent.
consistent day of the week that everybody knows.
right, the community use is March through May, so that's obviously not them using the outside pools in terms of that being a pool in March. But it could be that it's not offered regularly, so you don't turn it on in March, right?
Right.
That
Yeah,
could
I
be
can
true,
see
They
that.
used to get time
But-
through the whole year,
right, and currently,
and I don't think it's fair not to.
so.
It's an interesting point, something to consider. Yeah. One night. That's it.
Are we adjourned?
Adjourned.